There we go. Unmuted my microphone on YouTube there. Good evening, YouTube. Facebook isn't with us tonight. Unless Rob decides to pop in, then by all means he might pop in. I can't promise that he will or he won't. So he's usually the one who takes care of watching things in the background while we continue on. So for tonight, we're going to do a webinar based on the warp effect, and the warp effect is a rather fun and it's a great addition, but it's not a graphic effect by any means. And if you are out there in your sequencing efforts trying to come up with things that are interesting, and you haven't played with the warp effect, hopefully after tonight, you're probably going to want to start playing with it a little bit. As always, whenever I do these neat little, walkthrough sessions, I always pick up something or I'm reminded of something that maybe I haven't done in quite a long while, and so I end up having a little bit of fun. So I'm going to start out tonight with I'm going to walk through the different settings and so forth on the effect. But when we get to the end, if you're in YouTube, I will try to watch the YouTube stream. If you're in YouTube, there's a handful of people watching. By all means, either give me a comment in the comment section. Make sure you can hear me. I'm pretty sure you can. But we're going to do a little bit of audience participation during the end of this, and we're going to do it through chat. So if you have chat open, if you want to jump in Zoom, you can jump in Zoom through chat, or you can do chat through YouTube, and I'll watch both of them. And at the end, I didn't plan out any great effects, but what I wanted to do was I wanted to. Oh, good. William said that we're loud and clear on YouTube. Thank you, William. What I want to do is I want to give you guys the chance to go ahead and throw some ideas, throw some effects, maybe pick 2 effects and we'll layer them and we'll mess around with the warp effect to see what kind of fun things that we can come up with. And with that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started. So tonight, and now if you're in Facebook or if you're on YouTube, then you just saw me disappear. I'm a little guy in the bottom left corner here. But if you're in Zoom, you see me up in the top right. It's a little different how things happen on the back end. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get started with the default setting of the warp effect. So the first thing that you notice about the warp effect is whenever you grab it and you pull it down, the default setting does absolutely nothing. There is nothing going on the model preview for the matrix panel. There's nothing. Warp is not a graphic effect. It does what it says it does. It warps. It does. It's an active. It's an active thing that xLights forces upon anything that's below it, and it requires you to use canvas mode. Now, canvas mode, and it clearly says this in the top of the header of the warp here. Whenever you look at the effect settings, it says the warp effect distorts the pixels in the layers below it. The canvas option in the layer blendings box must be enabled for it to work. Now, what they're talking about is this canvas mode over here. Now, you notice how it's check marked here, and if it's not check marked, then the warp effect is just an effect on top that's not going to send any data out. I will give you a spoiler alert that if you use a lot of the warp effect, you do take a hit whenever you render effects. If you use it across very long effects, it's going to take a hit because what xLights has to do is it has to render the warp effect, then has to render what's underneath of it and apply the warp effect to it. So it renders things twice. And if you're on a Mac, then many people on the Mac don't give a crap because their stuff renders in 1 second or some crazy stuff like that. But for the rest of us, you might take a hit for having some kind of issue with rendering. So usually I start out by walking through from top to bottom all of the different functions and usages of the warp or of each of the effects. In this case, I'm going to start with not with the warp type. We're going to bounce back to this at the end because I think that's where a lot of the fun happens. But I want to break this down into the different other features that are available, and then we'll get to the warp types, because the warp types is where the fun is. So we'll revisit the warp types at the end, and this is where I want you to be thinking about throwing some great suggestions in either the or the YouTube chat, because I can see the YouTube chat and I can see the Zoom chat. So while you're here, there's 34 people in Zoom right now. By all means, as you're seeing this, what would you like me to put on the screen, and how would you like me to apply it? And then we can play from there, and that gives me an idea what you guys are looking for, and kind of make it a little bit more fun for you. So we'll go ahead and get started. Now there are there's warp types, and we'll go through them individually, but each of those warp types has a specific set of parameters. They're either constant, they're in, or they're out. Now, what you can think of this treatment type is, it's almost the same as an in transition or an out transition. And I'll give you an example here. So this is the fill effect. And I'm going to quickly delete so you can see what the fill effect looks like. I've selected some random colors with black. The fill effect has an effect or so forth. I can throw another black in there so you can see how it does some interesting color gradients across things, and it's very useful to use for masking, and it's interesting to use for different situations. This might be something that we talk about in another PPD webinar, but I digress. I actually did a webinar many years ago on this. We could revisit it though. But what I wanted to do was I just wanted to show you what the base effect looked like, what it kind of looks like. And then I use this the whole way through so that we don't change the constant. You just get to see so we have a constant, we don't, and what we do change is the warp, so you can see the differences in it. So we'll go ahead and we'll put the warp effect back. You can pay attention to the warp types. These are drops as we go, because I do change them. But I want to share with you what constant is. Constant means that I can set the effect from start to finish over top of another effect, and it's warping the effect underneath of it, but it's doing it water drop wise with the warp type. It's doing it at a constant rate. It's constantly repeating, doing the same thing. Okay, that's what is. So that's the one treatment type. Then we have, in this instance, we have the in treatment. So if we click on this warp type, it says treatment is in, and we allow the effect to play out. It's like a transition in from using the warp effect as part of the effect. So basically what you can do is you can use the warp effect as an in transition. And as I said, it's very much like the layer blendings tab with your in and out transition. Now you have this as your out transition. And if we kind of go, let's see, I'll put another layer in down below. I should have done this earlier. And if we watch the whole effect, see, go in and it plays and then it goes out. Comes in and it plays and it goes out. And so that's the idea with the in and the out, and then you have the constant. Now, obviously, yes, I changed up some of the treatment styles, but that's important, or the warp types. But the treatment styles are definitely helpful if you're trying to find creative ways to enter or introduce one effect or end another effect. And I've used that quite a bit. The next section we'll do is the XY sliders. It goes without saying that you can change based on, I'm clicking on the wrong one. That's another thing too that you catch yourself doing. Whenever you want to change the warp effect, you end up clicking on the regular effect trying to change the warp, and it's probably not going to work real well for you. But anyway, I digress. We have the Y axis and the X axis. You can move either of those. Sometimes it puts a value curve in there, but it doesn't really need a value curve. But if you use your X slider, you can slide across back and forth. If you use your Y slider, it moves it top to bottom. And it's helpful if you're trying to achieve a certain look or to show movement from a certain specific area. If you're trying to draw people's eyes whenever you're sequencing maybe to a different part of the house, and you want to see that start point or that end point or the flow through of it. So those are your XY sliders. Another thing that you can do is you can put value curves on all of these. So anything that has these value curve sliders or those value curve arrows, those can definitely and absolutely be applied to as far as value curves go. So if you want to have it bouncing to the beat, you can have it bouncing to the beat. That's something interesting. And again, like I said, it's a lot of fun to kind of go through these. To sit down, if you sit down and you spend 1 hour and you want to sit there and say, how does this effect work? This is exactly what you do. So the next section we'll go through is the cycle count slider. And if you go through, this is one dissolve is one warp type. You have a cycle count. You can have it go real fast. Now this is only 2 seconds in real life here, 2 seconds. But if you click on that and you have it doing it 9 times, maybe you extended the effect out rather long and you wanted to repeat that a few times, you can do that. But maybe you only want to do it 1 time. Maybe you only want to do it as an in, and as we showed you earlier, So there's your constant slider. You have you have a higher cycle count on some. This is circular swirl. But then there's some like this is the wave or wavy warp, and if you look at the slider, you'll notice that it's completely disabled. That means you can't use it whatsoever. You'll also happen to notice that the XY axis is not active in this either, because what xLights is doing is it's taking the whole thing. You can't localize the wave on this warp to a specific area on the screen. But this is a rather fun warp type to play with, especially around the 4th of July. Definitely a interesting and fun one to add from the 4th of July for putting a flag on it. So next we have we've done the cycle counts. So we've done the XY. Now it's the speed slider. Again, you get to have a little bit of fun with this whenever you're doing something. Here's the water drops, and water drops is the default setting. But I mean, that to me that looks like a fish's mouth. It kind of pops open every once in a while. But notice there's no cycle count, so you can't bump it up and make it go make it have more cycles. You can only add the speed to it, and it's rather interesting that you can do that. Good question that came in on the chat is, can the warp effect be used with a shader? We'll get into that. Go ahead and add that to the section at the end. We'll pull a shader in and we'll try that out. Okay. We can also utilize that for different. This is another version here. The cycle count is here and available, but notice the speed count. Whenever we talk about the circle reveal, it's not available. So you can't edit the circle reveal using the speed control slider. But there are other warp types that do. You have this is a rather fast ripple. You can slow it down. You can have it go kind of nice. If you need a nice slow kind of ripple effect, that's a way to do it. So that's a little bit of fun. And then obviously you have the last one that you have the frequencies. So the frequency is going to be how often it happens. The cycle count, obviously cycle count, the speed, and the frequency. And again, in this case, water drops doesn't have a frequency count. However, and obviously you can see here, I must have changed this. You can see here that circle reveal doesn't have one either. But if we go into the ripple, you can see that the ripple does have a frequency slider. So you can make it more frequent, you can make it less frequent. And then in this instance, you can also slow the speed down, can kind of have it in slow motion. This is great for, the warp effect is great for doing like techno stuff and EDM music. There's a lot of fun use cases for using this, and it's rather enjoyable. So we'll go ahead, roll on, and we'll finally hit on what I think are going to be the most fun topic tonight, which is the warp types. And so what I've done is I've just grabbed a couple of basic graphic effects. So I would say probably some of the most common effects that you could use are the bars, the pinwheel, the spiral effect, and the butterfly. Those are what many people are gonna, go to and grab. Those are your common kind of effects that if you're new to sequencing, or you just like to sequence enough to get your show going, this is where most people are going to start. The hard part is how do you make it all look really cool? Well, it takes a lot of time to make it all look really cool, especially whenever you're trying to layer effects and get different looks and so forth. Usually, I'm not saying the more layers the better, but whenever you spend the time working with each individual effect and you know what they can do, then you can take them and start layering them together, which it's rather hard to teach that, because you get 30 minutes into layering one effect that's 4 seconds long, and then you get 30 minutes into it and you're like, oh man, this doesn't even look like anything. I have to start over again. So it's really hard to teach people how to layer. You just have to know how the effects work, and that's why sitting down and doing this demo is important. So we'll go back. We'll start with the bars effect, and again, start thinking about, or maybe start popping them in chat. If you're on YouTube, start popping them in chat, and we'll come up with a couple of requests, and we'll go through some of the different treatment types that are available for them. So this is bars, and you can see that this warp type is the water drops. That's the first one on the list. If I go down to dissolve, we've seen dissolve a couple of times. There's some that we haven't seen yet. We have circle reveal. So this is, it's got a value curve on it. See how the circle's kind of like a searchlight constantly going in. Now we can go this in, and where it just comes in the whole time, or we can do this out, change the treatment type as well. We can go to the next one, which is banded swirl. So banded swirl obviously has the XY axis that's active on it. If you have the out, the in works. It doesn't take it from a black screen. Well, it pulls it in, it fades it in basically, but it's not doing a full like from nothing into something. And then you have constant, which is what you're used to seeing. So that's banded swirl. You could we could add a couple more cycle counts to it. We could get rid of these value curves, and we could turn the frequency down so it doesn't affect it as much, or it ultra affects it with more frequency. But you can't speed it up or slow it down. So the speed is set between the cycle count, I think, and the frequency. So that's a little bit of fun there. That's banded swirl. Let's go into ripple. There, Jason's got a good suggestion there. Handful of people out there on YouTube. If there's something that you want to see, by all means, pop it in chat there. Okay. So here we have, this is constant ripple. I don't know if you can change the ripple. So yeah, you can do an in ripple. So it ripples in, or you can ripple it out. And that means, so you might do something like this. If you were sequencing, you could turn the frequency down a little bit, and you could fade this out here at the end by giving it a fade out of, I don't know, 0.5. So that's something interesting that you could play with, by all means. Again, this is just with the bars effect, so we're not even touching on all of the effects. But it's impossible. It's impossible to come up with absolutely every effect to test each treatment type. So single water drop does not have an in or an out. You might be able to hear that through my speakers in Zoom, or I don't think YouTube can. Maybe it can. Whenever I try to change this, it doesn't allow me to change it from constant. So the only single water drop that you get is with constant. And it looks like you can bump up the number of water drops that you do, the cycle count that is. And it might not be as interesting. Maybe you have to change how the effect is rendered. Maybe you need to put it in 3D highlight and it shows up a little better, right? That might be something that you have to do. But without getting into too much detail about the effect, just placing the warp over top of it and going through all of these is rather important. So here you have circular swirl, and we got that jacked up. Let's slow that down. So that's constant. It comes in and then it swirls out. I think we showed this earlier. If we only put this in as a circular swirl to as an in transition, that's the same kind of thing that you can have it do, or you can have it as an out. And then we have the drop. This is a lot of fun. So drop is a lot of interesting fun because I think you can have it as in, or you can have it as out, which is let's see. Let's do it as an out, and it just takes it away. It doesn't fade it out, but if you want to fade out, you would just add a fade out. So there you go. Just an interesting way to look at it. If you don't want the bars to always be warped, you only put the warp effect over the specific area during that part of the sequence that you want it to kind of buzz or crack or snap or whatever. So that's drop. Drop is a lot of fun. We saw wavy a little earlier, and wavy doesn't have, like I said, a treatment it doesn't have very many options. The only thing it has is a speed. You can slow it down or you can speed it up. And there's plenty of times that I've used this. I can see in my head the different instances where I've gathered those. So that is wavy. Sample on. So this is a question for the developers because I don't know the answer. From what I understand, sample on is just sampling what is wherever the sample area is, I believe. And if I move this, if I make this stop, if I do no movement here, it's sampling wherever the green happens to be. I'm wondering if I go up, yeah. So that's what it's doing. It's sampling this point, this XY point. Whatever color is there, it picks that color and it displays it over top of everything. So I don't know how useful sample on is, but it's there. I guess you could change it based on the color, and I don't know. This has never been one that I've utilized very much. But it takes a sampling. So if one of the developers wants to share in chat, or somebody knows why they created the sample on, that's what sample on does. But it is there. It's an option if you would like to sample a specific pinpoint on your XY coordinates. And then next we have mirror. Now mirror seems to be the fun one. Now it's only fun whenever it moves, but it doesn't always appear to do something interesting for everything. So this is the bars effect, and it looks like the bars effect is collapsing in on itself. It will become a little bit more apparent when we have a different effect, but these are horizontal bars. If we go to bars and do this, we go to from up and down, we go to left. Now it looks like it's compressing. Well, actually, the bars effect already expands up and down. It naturally does this. It doesn't need the warp effect. So if you're trying to use the mirror on the bars when they're vertical or horizontal and they don't appear to be doing anything, you're not going crazy. That's just the way that the effect works. So sometimes what you think is going to happen, nothing might happen. And that's why it's important to sit down and play with this. And then last is copy. And what copy will do is it will copy and it will duplicate, 50. It will duplicate whatever it's sampling in the middle or in a specific area, and it'll apply that into 4 quadrants, or however you set up the XY in order for it to read. Now again, this doesn't look rather interesting. You could take 2 bar effects, put them one on top of another, and layer them and do kind of the same thing if you change the layer setting box and you move the buffer around. You can have some fun with it that way. But this really seems rather uninteresting. But it's just because the effect that we've selected, and this is why I asked you guys to share in chat which effects you'd like me to see and what kind of treatments you'd like to see. So this is the reason why. This is exactly the reason why. Here you've got the fan effect or the pinwheel effect. And if we started over, we could scroll down through all of these and see what they all do. The circle reveal, that looks really neat, kind of little wobbly, little, interesting, different aspects of using the warp effect are cool for specific parts of the song. For whenever I can see using this in Toy Shack, having a good time with that in Toy Shack. You've got dissolve there, which we've seen. You have drop. Drop looks really cool. Drop always looks really cool. You could have it go up and down a couple times. It could bounce to the music if you have 4 beats or whatever you're trying to do. So there's drop. We'll go to wavy, and you can see it waving back and forth a little bit. Sample on. Now you can see it's kind of flashing because the sample, the center point, color is constantly changing from one of those 3 that are selected. Now you have copy. So this is where copy comes in rather interesting, because now you can see kind of what it's doing. xLights is looking at a specific point on the grid and it's copying it across all of them. So it's making a mini version of one corner of the screen. Now remember, you can always put a value curve on these and you can have it slide across, and you can see it doing a little bit different things there. See how it's sampling from different areas and it's moving that that location, that view screen. And again, just playing around with some value curves really adds a little bit to it. So that's that is the copy, and I think we jumped right over the mirror. So this is mirror. Mirror is probably the most fun one that people will find interesting, as having a little bit more fun with. Because what it's doing is it's taking the effect that's down below it and it's creating a image of itself that is turned literally from the center outward, and it creates a mirror effect similar to a kaleidoscope, but it uses the basic here. If I turn on the layer setting box, I think there we go. The transformations, your standard, your rotate 90 degrees, your rotate 90 clockwise, your rotate 180 degrees, and it kind of does that all on one screen for you. So this one's a little bit more fun to play with. Another thing too that you should be aware of whenever you are kind of working with different effects. I'm going to go ahead and put this back on water drops, and the reason I'm going to do that is because look at the pinwheel. The pinwheel is not anything special. It's a basic pinwheel. All I've done is I didn't change anything other than the thickness. There's the thickness back to the basic level. But look what happens whenever you add the twist to it. I mean, you just made a jagged pinwheel. Like, there's no way to do that. There's literally no way to do that unless you sit down. And again, this is from me just sitting down and messing around with xLights to see what it can do. What does this treatment type? Now, I've been using xLights for well over 10 years now, the original iteration and our current version. And there are just a lot of things that you can do, but you're never going to sit down and force yourself to do until you do, and then you find something that's fun or interesting like this, because that's how the warp effect works. So I just want to point that out. A lot of people give us a lot of credit because we can sequence. The thing is that we take the time to sit down to figure it out. So this is the spiral effect, another common effect that most people are going to love to play with. Again, these are the common effects that everybody likes. And if we go into the warp type, that's the warp drop, or water drops, excuse me. You have dissolve here. So we've seen dissolve. Dissolve's really cool. Circle reveal, banded swirl, and that looks kind of neat, kind of dancing along. Then you have let's see, ripple, and you have singular water drop, which maybe it doesn't appear to do as much as what you think it does. Maybe you have to bump it up, especially in an effect like this where it's only affecting one thing. Maybe this needs to be a little bit more still for that ripple or that single water drop to show up. Then you have circular swirl, which is rather interesting in itself there. And here's the reason why. This is interesting because you have negative space. If you have an effect that is full color on, the circular swirl will still do something. It just may not look as kind of swirly as this does. So we have drop, and that doesn't look as interesting as it normally does until we take the spiral wraps and we change the spiral wraps so that they're a little bit more tilted. But it's just because of the angle at which that spiral is, you can barely see the drop. If you change the angle, you can see that the drop comes in rather stark now. So that's, again, a lot of little things that you can play around with and have some fun with. Wavy. Here's wavy. Looks like a flag. Sample on. It's sampling the colors as it goes across. And now you have mirror. So the spiral effect gives a good example of what mirror does. We knew without the warp effect, it's going from top left to bottom right. But if we take the mirror, it's taking it and it's making 4 quadrants out of it, and it's having it go in a different direction without seams to kind of give you that interesting look that you can see now. So this is where mirror kind of pays off and you have a lot of fun you can play with mirror. Mirror is just a really good example of what the warp effect is good for. And so here's mirror copy. It's literally taking a mini version of the effect and it's making 4 copies and putting it across all the windows. Now if we go back to the bars effect and notice how copy doesn't appear to do anything. That's why, because this is what xLights is actually doing to it. So, and then I think that's it for the bars. Now let's get into, this is the butterfly, and this is the last, well, I've got the shockwave. The shockwave was really cool. Butterfly effect. One of the things that I have done with the butterfly effect, I changed the colors from the rainbow color to the color palette. And the reason I did this is because I like to add a little bit of black color in, the black, and have it selected to be in there specifically. Instead of it being all rainbows, which is nice, I wanted to be able to see that negative space as it rolls by. Because you see, when you have that negative space and you have the ripple over top of it, or in this instance you have the water drops, you can see that something is going on more than just the effect is doing its thing. So having that negative space, again, that's the same thing with the spirals, that's the same thing with the pinwheel. You have that negative space that allows you to play with. When you have the bars, it may not be as exciting, we'll say. So with that being said, we'll go through, this is the water drops, this is dissolve, and then you've got the banded swirl. And again, I've got some value curves on here because I was just playing around. So that's kind of interesting. Looks like kind of like a jumping frog or something. You have a ripple. And you have a single water drop. See, now the single water drop comes through just a little bit better because there's much more solid. And that negative space doesn't help you at all, see? So that's what's important to see whenever you're trying to go through some of these different warp types. So this is drop. Drop's always kind of neat. Wavy, and then you have the sample on, and mirror. That's a rather interesting mirror. So check this out. This is another reason why it's interesting to take the mirror and utilize some of the negative space for an effect like the butterfly. You can do the same thing with plasma. Plasma does some really interesting things when you add some black into it and change it up a little bit. And then here is copy. So there is your butterfly effect under the copy warp. And the last one I want to go through that I've kind of lined up, and there's a handful of these in the chat. If you're on YouTube, by all means, go ahead and put some suggestions in if you like. If you want to see me put a couple things in. But this is the last one that I've kind of pre-set up, and this is the shockwave effect. Now, What does the shockwave effect do? It's like it's a shockwave. It's boom, explosion. Now I can change this a little bit so it's a little more thin, but I wanted to make sure that it exploded from the center all the way out, and you could see a good duration of the effect. So just under water drops, I thought this was really neat. I think the thicker the width of the shockwave, that just gives it a really interesting kind of blow up. It just really looks really neat. I think that's probably it was one of the things I haven't done in a while, and it's like, oh, I need to use that more often. Then you have dissolve, which is kind of interesting whenever it's opening up and just starting it and then closing it off when there's hardly anything there. You've got circle reveal. That's going to be a little bit of fun to play with. And again, I'm using some value curves on there. This is the banded swirl on a shockwave where you have a lot of negative space, so that negative space really plays to using the shockwave. And it's the fact that it's kind of blended, I guess you could say. So here's the ripple, which the ripple kind of works with the shockwave because ripple's going in a circular motion and outward. So it may not appear to have it's a touch of an effect to give it a little bit more than being nothing. Next we'll go with the single water drop, which as you can see is much more available to see here because you have solid color plus it fades in and out with that darkness. If we jack this up, let's play with this, right? If we jack this up so it's a little bit more full on, you can clearly see that one ripple or that one single water drop. So yeah, interesting. Again, something to play with. So here's circular swirl. And let me go ahead and, oops, turn that down a little bit. So that could be a really interesting kind of introduction into one effect to another, like a transition effect. So something fun. You have the drop, and you can make this in, I think, the whole time. That would really be neat. That would really be neat to play around with. Next you have wavy, and I would imagine that the longer you draw the shockwave out for it would be a little bit more appealing in different instances. So here's sample on, as it's going through the colors, it's sampling the center. And then mirror. Let's go ahead and get rid of this. So mirror doesn't really do much because mirror's already symmetrical. There's no cross movement or flipping or anything. Oops, I just hit the microphone. And so in some instances, mirror doesn't do as much. And then here's copy. So copy is taking it, you can see exactly what copy is doing. It's taking it right from the 50% or the 50 and the 50 mark. We could probably move this over, and you could have 2, or you can move it over this way, and you could have 2. And if you do this at the bottom, now it's sampling at the 0 and the 100 point. But if we go like that, you get a little bit of different takes on the warp effect whenever you start moving some of the sliders. You can do. I don't know about cycle count. How many cycle count? Does it do anything? I haven't messed around with that for the copy. So there you have it. That's the warp effect. The warp effect is a lot of fun to play with. The challenge is now you have 52 effects in xLights. Of them, about 30 to 35 of them are all graphic effects. And when you put when I say graphic effects, they're an effect that if you put something down, they'll go and do something. So those are effect like the picture effect, but you have to have a picture. The shader effect, but you have to have a shader. Is a graphic effect. You have the single strand. There's a lot of things that you can do. Now, obviously, that's not going to do much, but this is where you switch that mirror around, and this is where you do different things whenever you start mixing your layer blendings and your settings, and you utilize rotozoom and different things like that. So. But all of these graphic effects, they'll do something. The thing is that they're not going to do anything. There's some that aren't going to do anything at all for you. like the candle effect. I could talk about the candle effect for a second. Candle effect is just a solid palette, and it's meant for a single pixel that you would put at the end of a candle, and this gives it a good flicker. And so if you can imagine this was a candle and a flame, you could give this kind of different hues of a warm color that you would find in a fire. That you're not selecting the colors, it's automatically done that way. So and then you have per node, so does it per individual pixel. But in any event, that's the I just did two webinars in one. How about that? Okay, so I'm going to go to chat here. If you're on YouTube, we're going to end this up, coming up here pretty soon. And what I want to do is I want to go to the top. Said, let's see, Bam Bam, good old Bam Bam. Who was that? That was Fred Flintstone. No, Barney Rubble, right? Is that Barney Rubble? That was Barney Rubble's boy. So Bam Bam, he wants to know, can the warp effect be used with a shader? Well, let's go grab a shader. Bam Bam, do you happen to have a shader in mind? Oh, I don't want to pick one. I want to download one. Oh, it doesn't want to download one. I'll have to go look for one. Pro shaders. I have a handful in there. So, Black Cherry. That's a good one. Black Cherry. We'll do Black Cherry. Black Cherry Cosmos. That's one you can go download. So this is one pretty much everybody's familiar with. This is Black Cherry. Let's go ahead and put a warp effect on here, which is all the way over here. Warp. I'll pull that down. And so you got a couple different treatment types. That looks interesting as it is. There's Dissolve. Dissolve makes a great start to an effect if you do an in or an out. And then you've got something like that. So you've got an in and an out, right? So there's your effect. Well, we'll make it a little longer than 2 seconds. We can play around a little bit. So there's your Cherry Cosmos going in and out and then back in. So that's a good one to play with. Again, it's a matter of just having some fun with it, right? There's Circle Reveal. Let's get rid of these value curves so it's just a standard one. And you have Banded Swirl. Let's all look at the mirror. We all want to see what mirror looks like. Yep. Mirror looks great. Circular Swirl we did. You've got Drop. Drop is phenomenal. Just as a transition, to slowly transition something in, like, you know, hey, it's like a zipper or something, right? I think I'm going to put a note to any of the developers who might be listening. What would a zipper effect, like a zipper on your jacket zipper, what would a zipper effect do? That just popped into my head. Don't ask me why. Sample on, that doesn't get too exciting. Here's Mirror. That's rather interesting. Looks like a monster trying to eat somebody. Even Copy is going to look interesting. So that's a good point. All of the shaders, they're all going to work with this as long as they're a graphical shader. There are some warp type shaders that work just like this, and there's also Kaleidoscope, to be sure. There are ways that you can mess around with it. So Jason said, can a warp effect be layered on top of another warp effect? Absolutely it can. So let's go back to our pinwheel example. And what we'll do is we will make this thicker. We'll do a twist. And we will put this one down below and we'll call this Water Drops. So this is the basic, that's really nifty. Let's too twisted. Remember what we said? We said that if you put twist on it, let's change this to 3D. There we go. And so you got something interesting there with a pinwheel effect, something you might have threw out, right? So now let's go ahead and copy and paste another warp effect. And we can have it do some sort of different thing. And that's what you can do. I mean, you can put the mirror on it, see what that does. I mean, if you really want to get into it, you could really do a whole different third layer. You could do wavy and have everything wave and you know, triple. Now if you do this for a long time, xLights is going to be like, hey, here's a warp effect, render 1 time. Here's another warp effect, render 2 times. Here's another warp effect, render 3 times. Here's another effect and everything below it, render that 1 time. So you be careful the more you put on. It depends on how hard xLights has to work in order to calculate. I'm not saying that it's going to tax your system, but it just adds on some render time. Just be aware of that. So good render time ETA 2065. So yeah, that's funny. Good. Next one. Anybody have any suggestions? Put them in chat. If you're on YouTube, put them in chat, by the way. When you find a warp effect that you like and you want to save it, what do you do? So Chris, you just like Tom's going to answer down below. He said any effect can be saved into your presets library. You can select all effects you want, and to save them, you right-click and choose the effect preset options to save it. So if we really like this one, which this is a little big, there we go. You select all of these. You right-click, and you go to your effects preset window. Now mine popped up over here. Now don't be jealous. I've got lots of preset effects, but I've been collecting them, not collecting them, but creating them since 2015. So give me a break. I've been doing this a long time. I have a kaleidoscopes folder that I put them in. I didn't start a warp one, but so if I were keeping these organized, I might throw it into my kaleidoscopes. I'd select this, and I'd hit new preset, and I'd call this, I don't know, warp webinar. And there you would save it. And the important thing is you click OK here, you close that off, go back to your layout tab and hit the save button. That's how you would save it. So great question, Chris. I very rarely start at 0 whenever I start sequencing because I've layered so much that there's not a lot that I don't want to. It would take me a long time to start from 0. So starting at 0, just build up some preset effects. That's a good idea. Anything else you guys want to see? Anything else? I mean, this has been a lot of fun. I think it's interesting that that you have an effect that you can take and transform absolutely anything down below it. I mean, literally, you can grab the marquee effect. How exciting is the marquee effect? If we go to skip size, add some thickness to it. I mean, look at that. Do a little bit of stagger. Maybe we add some band sides to it. I mean, what else can you do with it, right? So the text effect, Bobby, that's a great question. Now, let me get rid of some of these. He put in there the text effect. So I'll lay a text effect down, and I have to put something in there. And since this is for Bobby, let me get rid of these. We'll do green, because green shows up really well. So that is interesting in and of itself. There's your warp effect over top of it. You can use the layer. You can do one up there, and you can copy and paste it. You can put another one over here. So there you got 2 hello Bobbies, and what can you do? You can dissolve them, and you can circle reveal them, and you can do a banded swirl on them. And the ripple, and that's the single water drop. Again, interesting because there's actually a lot of dark space, and you can see that ripple, that single ripple. That's really, really neat. So there's circular swirl. Circular swirl with text is a lot of fun. Not gonna lie, that's a lot of fun. So yeah. There's drop. You want to see it drop faster? Do it more. Do more push-ups. Yes, drill sergeant. And there's wavy and mirror. Now, I think I found a bug because we didn't have any value curves on these before, did we? At least I don't think we did. But it remembers that whenever I put the mirror on it. And there's copy. Kind of does the same thing. So, yeah, rather interesting there, Bobby. Yeah. Yeah, text has some fun to it whenever it comes to that. Anybody else got anything? YouTube, anything? So if you have anything else, we're going to go ahead into the open Q&A session of the PPD Zoom webinar. Thank you all for joining us on YouTube. Unfortunately, Facebook is not with us today, so I'll have to upload this to Facebook. That'll be a first, but I'll have to download from YouTube. So guys, if you like the video out there in YouTube land, by all means, click the like button, give us a thumbs up. If you think this is helpful, consider hitting the share button and share this with everybody in the groups. To go through these it's a lot of fun to go through them, but it also might spur something in you to kind of inspire you or find a way to make it a little more interesting and add a little bit more zest into your sequencing. So if you did like the video, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't hit the subscribe button yet, hit the subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. And finally, if you appreciate what we do here every week on the PPD YouTube channel and the PPD Facebook group, Pixel Pro University, consider joining the PPD Sequence Club and supporting us here at what we do with the community. We do one awesome sequence. Actually, we've been doing two awesome sequences each and every month now for almost a year. Now is a great time to join, and that helps support us and continue delivering great content to you. So guys, thank you out there and have a wonderful evening. We will see you in the next video. So take care and goodbye for now.